This meeting to order. It's good. Rick? Good. Okay, perfect. No. Okay. We're going to call this meeting to order. We're going to start with an approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor McIntosh. All in favor? Okay. Are there any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none. There was no closed meeting today, so can I have everyone rise in just a moment for national anthem? We would like to acknowledge the treaty lands and territory of the Williams Treaty Nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize that Dufferin County is the traditional territory of the Wendat and the Haudenosaunee and is home to many Indigenous people today. Tonight's meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. We're good? Okay, this meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. Mona, do you need a moment? We're still having echoing. Oh, yep. Okay, we're good? Oh, that's better. Perfect. We have no rise in report today. We do need an adoption of the minutes of the previous council meeting from December 12th, 2022 and December 14th, 2022. Can I have a motion? Deputy Mayor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Prendergast. All in favor? And carried. We will start with our presentations, petitions, and delegations. We will start with Don Van Kampen, the co-chair of the International Plowing Match 2023, and Charlie Bryan, co-chair, related events, International Plowing Match and Rural Expo. If you can approach the delegation chair. Before we get started, I just want to remind delegates that they have 5 minutes to make their presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. The IPM was started 104 years ago, and its objective is to promote agriculture and to provide educational opportunities related to agriculture and rural life. To showcase the municipalities and county, its businesses, hotels, local vendors contribute to society by its citizens. It has generated economic development of close to 25 million in positive impact by tourists and event operations. We expect 70 to 90,000 people to attend. They will see Plowing, a tented city full of education, history, special events, entertainment, local artisans. Hotels, businesses, and clubs will be involved as well and will reap the benefits. We'd like to ask to borrow a $20,000 repayable loan to be paid back December of 2023. Studies have shown 25 million in positive impact by tourists and event operations in the near area. We hope you'd like to be a part of this event. And we have a little slideshow that maybe okay, thank you. Okay. You do it? Okay. So the International Plowing Match is ran by the Ontario Plowmen's Association and the supporting communities in the area. That is our logo for this year. That's the tented city. So that is built, basically starts around August, the beginning of August, and they put up hydro and water and all the tents, and then after the match it has to come back down again, but it's in a farmer's field. We use about close to 1,000 acres, right, in the Bowling Green area. There's some highlights of the plowing match. So there's vendors and antiques. There'll be lots of tractor antiques. There's a tent with museum. Hopefully we'll be a part of it, and history and everything about the community. So we really want to focus on Dufferin County and what we're all about. That's just a picture of the farmers. That's the RV park, I guess, right? There's some more highlights. We have a rodeo that comes, and last year they had Amber Marshall and the rodeo team that comes and does shows. There they are there. Cowgirls, the Canadian cowgirls are called, I guess. The plowing competitions. Quite a few horses plow as well at it. More pictures of the tented city. The education center is really big. They have, so they'll have all the commodities will come, and they have an ag awareness tent for the kids to come. So the grade 3s usually come, but we're planning on having hopefully from kindergarten right up to grade 12. Hopefully, if the teachers will bring them. We have a big quilting competition. Well, they're going to have a display this year, right? A competition, but the ladies are working on that already. I already mentioned that about the economic study, I guess. The impact, community benefits. So at the end of the match, all the money that is profit will be donated back to the causes that the groups would like their part of their donation to go to. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Good evening and welcome. It is really nice to see an event such as this as we kind of get back to some form of normalcy. I've had the pleasure of attending the Minto County a plowing match that occurred a few years ago and having a connection to the Dufferin Federation of Agriculture. This is going to provide some enormous benefit to Dufferin County. And I think that that has been stressed very clearly in your presentation and your submission. The areas of Bowling Green, Laurel, and of course Grand Valley, and of course peripherally even here of Orangeville. Your comment or your question regarding the repayable loan, in the past, how long would that be typically paid back to the organizations or the communities that would provide that repayable loan?
Back, but we won't.
Absolutely. I think that this particular event, again, is going to provide enormous economic benefit to this region. Orangeville is going to be the benefactor, and I think that whatever the approach is in providing the opportunity for a repayable loan, would this go through our community grants process, Your Worship?
My understanding in speaking with the treasurer, and I can defer it to her in just a moment, would be that if we can bring it back to the budget process, we can find a way to fund it without using the community grants funds. But I will see if Madam Treasurer can speak to it. Nandini?
Thank you, Worship, through you to Council. So that would be my advice or suggestion rather today, that if we can take this request under advisement, we are getting into or going into our budget presentation next week, and perhaps Council can deliberate within that process.
Thank you very much, Ms. Syed. Yeah.
So just to follow up, Madam Treasurer, thank you for that clarification. So as from a timeline perspective, no doubt as you're organizing this, is there immediacy to those funds, or, because the event is being held in September of this year, is there some timeline that we can possibly end up receiving?
We are selling ready, and I'm sure it's not, but we have so that's really what the
And I saw one other ask, which was volunteers. So maybe through our connections within council, we might be able to, of course, provide some assistance in that request. Okay. you got a captive audience behind you too tonight. So big economic driver for this region, by the way. So yeah, it is quite something to see. Yeah. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there additional questions? Yeah, Councillor Stevens.
Through Your Worship, are you seeking loans elsewhere as well, or just from us?
I think
yeah. And Grand Valley. So we plan to visit all the townships.
Thank you.
Was there any additional questions from members of council? So I think at this point, we will take your request back to the budget process, which is beginning next week. And we will be in touch once we finish that. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to help you. I think this is going to be an amazing event. And thank you for all the work that you're doing towards it.
For letting us come.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. Up next, we have Tony Trato. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the last name, from 19 Stewart Court regarding a water bill. If you can pop up. And the mic's already on for you, and please just advise me if I'm saying your last name correctly.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just here to kind of get some closure to this water bill. I got a water bill for over $10,000. My normal consumption is $70 a month. I was in touch with a few people when I called the town. Somebody came by, somebody from Neptune came by. Nobody could explain where the water's going. My calculation here for this 52 cubic meters a day, 52,000 liters of water a day over a month, that's 1,560,000 liters. I really don't know. That's like an Olympic-sized pool. I don't know where the water went. I can't say the water didn't get used. I know it didn't get used by me. I don't understand. I don't know where we go from here. I think I was in emails with Tim. So I was suggested from my friend Joe, write a letter. I did. I took the channels that I have to. I really,
Could you just lean in a little closer to the mic? Sorry, we're just having a hard time up here. If you don't mind. Thank you.
I just want some resolution. I don't know where we go from here. I really don't want to pay $10,000. We can come, like my average consumption is $75 a month for water. I'll pay you almost a year. I don't care. I'll do something. But somebody suggested that we have the meter pulled and tested and calibrated. I don't think that's gonna, you've already come, 3 people have come to look at the meter. Nobody can determine where the water is going, if it even went through the meter. I don't know if it has anything to do with it. Tim said probably not, but there was a lot of road construction, water main on Centennial Road during this time when we had this, 1 month where the meter reading was really high. I don't know if something got in there and screwed up the meter. I have no idea. But there's no water on the property. There's no leaks. It just kind of resolved itself that, I checked the meter, little dial's not spinning around. I don't see any water consumption. So just asking, to do something.
Thank you very much. For council's benefit, I'm just going to let you know that we've got another person also delegating about water, and we do have a report coming forward for 12.1. So we will be dealing with resolutions at 12.1 and debating how we can help you. But before we move on to the next delegate, I just want to know if there's any questions from members of council. Deputy Mayor?
I don't have any questions for you, sir, but I would like to say both of these 2 letters that are written tonight are beautifully written. I can feel the frustration through the words on the page, and I thank you for your professionalism as you came here, and we're going to figure something out for you. And we'll do that at 12:1, but thank you for presenting yourself in such a professional way. So we appreciate it.
So it won't be too long. We've just got a few more delegates, and then we'll get to item 12.1. Okay, perfect. Next up, we have Mr. Diamond on behalf of Eddie Lovisoto from 62 Broadway regarding water bill.
Thank you.
You can feel free to have a seat if you'd like. Just make sure the mic is nice and close. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me. My problem seems small compared to the last gentleman that spoke before me. My name's Jim Diamond. I'm one of the partners in the 60 on Broadway Corporation. We're developing 60 and 62 Broadway. Things are moving along nicely. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about water. You'll see the letter that Mr. Lovisato sent to you so that the other people who may be in the audience that have the same issue understand. Our water meter readings from March till November last year averaged about $100 a month. And on the end of July, the property was vacated. The last tenants left, and my partners, Eddie and Teddy Lovisato, inspected the building because we'd had tenants in there for a long time and made sure there was no issues, no water running, no toilets going, everything like that. And our water bill for middle of July to middle of August was $62, which was about right when you're $100 a month and no one's there for 2 weeks. That seems about right. And then our water bill from the middle of September to the middle of October was $996. The town shut the water off on October the 3rd, and our water bill for October 15 to November 15 was $910. And so on an average of $1,200 a year for a water bill, we now owe the town $1,900 for 2 months when there was nobody in the building. Tim's been great. Your whole town's been great working with this, and everything we've done on this project has just been great. So I'm here tonight to say to council, Tim said, I've done everything I can for you. We don't have the ability to do it, but $100 a month would seem reasonable. $1,000 a month is not only improbable, but I would say impossible. And again, the building's down. There's no indication that there's any underground leaks or leaks going, toward the meter or anything like that. It's clearly a mechanical problem or electrical problem with the meters. And I'm just here to ask for your assistance in dealing with that. Thank you. And I hope to see you in a couple of months with building news.
Thank you very much. Again, before you leave, the same as the last delegate, if there's any questions from council at this time? No? Okay, we will deal with yours at 12.1 as well. So if you can, yep.
I just wanted to say one thing,
Sure.
Madam Mayor, if I can, because I have the microphone and I'm pretty comfortable with it. We've been working on our development project for about 4 years now, and some of you on council may recognize me as being a planner in Dufferin County for the last 40 years. I've acted for most of the municipalities. I've made the jump over to being a developer in Orangeville, and I plan to live in that building when we get it done. I have never had such a wonderful experience dealing with staff as I have on this development project in Orangeville. Your staff has been extremely helpful. They've been very responsive to everything we've done. And, I don't need to promote Orangeville, everybody else is realizing it, but I think you as council should recognize the fact that your staff has been exemplary in this whole process, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That's so nice to hear, and I'm sure that everybody will pass on that message to all the staff. Thank you. Next up, we have Ms. Peggy Bond at 18 Goldgate Crescent discussing the vaccination policy. Ms. Bond?
First of all, Happy New Year, everyone. I'm here to speak to item 12.8 on tonight's agenda regarding the recommendation of staff to council to suspend the current COVID-19 vaccine policy. I will speak to some points that would support revoking the entire policy rather than just suspending it. Point 1, the current policy is an overall bad policy. It was written and implemented with very little evidence and supporting rationale at a time when there was fear and a hurried sense that a policy should be put in place. Please see my letter attached to this agenda package, which includes the document that was provided to me on January 20th, 2022 by Andrea Shaw, Administrative Assistant to the CAO and Mayor. This summed up the points that town staff and council used to create and approve this policy. My rebuttal of these points was covered in my February 14, 2022 delegation to town council and is included also in this letter. In its current written form, the current town COVID-19 vaccine policy is ineffective as an infectious disease policy, coercive, discriminatory, punitive, and is vulnerable to legal challenge. So why would we suspend for potential future use a policy that is already outdated and poorly crafted in the first place? Point 2. In report CPS 2023-006, which is attached in this agenda package, it also states that, quote, should council decide to suspend these policies, there would be no need to introduce an infectious disease policy, end quote. This concerns me greatly as a healthcare professional. Briefly, an infectious disease policy is a comprehensive, multi-pronged approach to prevent and mitigate disease and illness in the workplace. An immunization policy is just one little sub-tab in a good infectious disease policy. Elements usually considered in developing and implementing an infectious disease prevention and control program include hand hygiene programs, preventative measures and controls, and here's where you could put a general vaccination policy. Written safe work procedure and exposure control plans readily and practically accessible, hazard communication, incident and illness reporting, documentation and record keeping, and regular program review. So as you can see, replacing an infectious disease policy with just a vaccine policy would be both completely inadequate and would not maximize the safety for all the people who work and volunteer in Orangeville. Finally, point number 3. The lens through which your legal advisors may recommend the suspension of this policy rather than the revocation of it is likely based on protecting the corporation of the town of Orangeville from damages due to legal action, not the health and safety of its employees or residents. Hence, their recommendations do not likely prioritize the long-term health and safety of our employees or residents. So in closing, will you decide to keep an ineffective, illogical, discriminatory, coercive, legally vulnerable policy in place for future possible use? Or will you revoke this policy and take the appropriate steps to develop a comprehensive, multi-layered, evidence-based, and effective infectious disease policy that will actually provide health and safety benefits to the employees and residents of the town of Orangeville now and for the future? I think that completely revoking it is the obvious answer at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bond. Was there questions from members of council for Ms. Bond? No questions? Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Dimpna Carolan at 48 Blue Heron Drive, Mono, also for vaccination policy.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Just a reminder, you do have 5 minutes, and go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think the previous speaker said more eloquently, but exactly how I feel also. I want to speak to the fact that you recommend suspending, and you recommend suspending based on the fact that the policy had achieved what it was intended to do at the time, which was to provide a safe work environment. And it did not. It was implemented in September of 2021. And back then, we already knew that vaccinated and unvaccinated people could get and spread COVID. Recently, Pfizer has released statements that they never actually tested the vaccine for transmission. And now we know after 2 years that it does not prevent transmission. So saying that, I'm a little nervous, saying that that the policy achieved what it was meant to achieve, it didn't work, and it was very discriminatory. It concerned me that after a year of the policy, people were still losing their livelihoods and being discriminated against. Vendors at your indoor market had to show proof of 2 vaccinations, yet consumers could walk in and shop. And after they faced a year of discrimination and lost their livelihood, they were faced again in September of 2022 to make this decision, when it made no sense. It wasn't a health policy anymore, it was a compliance policy, and that really concerns me. And so I want to say, we hold you account. You're our elected trustees. We hold you to account to review the policy that you put in place that didn't work, that was discriminatory, and to be accountable to us, the citizens that pay your salaries and that put you in those chairs, be accountable to us to have valid policies that are about health, not about coercion and discrimination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Was there any questions at all? No. I am going to ask council to give us a little bit of grace here. Mr. Terry Carter has arrived today. He'd like to speak on the topic of warming centers, and it's not listed as an agenda item. In order for him to proceed as a delegate, I just need to get consent from council for him to proceed. Could I have a motion to allow? Thank you. Councillor Andrews, Deputy Mayor Taylor, all in favor? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Mr. Carter, go ahead. Reminder, you have 5 minutes. Just have a seat and keep the microphone close to you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Your Worship and members of council, and thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak, and I will keep it to 5 minutes. I wanted to talk about the warming center issue, which I understand may be a topic of discussion during the new business. I want to put it into context from my perspective. I've addressed council before concerning issues involving homelessness for a number of years, because we do have an issue in the town of Orangeville. Back last January, the committee that was in place for homelessness, men's homelessness, had recommended that there be a warming center in Orangeville. It's been a year since that time, and we still don't have a 24-hour warming center. Excuse me, and we're heading into the coldest part of the year. Fortunately, we've had a couple of weeks of reprieve, but that's not likely to continue. The problem that we have is a real problem, and I wanted to share with you the reason that I wanted to address. I'm located at 211 Broadway. That's the location of our office. And for some reason, there seems to be an attraction for people that are homeless to come to the office either in the front or in the back, probably because we have the lighthouse right beside us as one of our tenants. And as a result, over the years, there have been a number of homeless men that have been there. I found outside the front door or at the back door. This morning, when I drove in before 7 a.m., I looked over and there's a bench right behind the lighthouse. And that's normally used for people at lunchtime. But I looked over and there was someone there. And I went over. And this person was lying flat out on the bench, curled up. I said, "Are you okay?" Person didn't answer. I said, "Are you okay?" Finally, the person said, "Yes, I'm okay." It was a young woman. I could barely see her face. She had black hair. I put her age maybe early 30s. And I said, "Why are you here?" She said, "I have nowhere to go. I was in a shelter and I had to leave and I had nowhere to go." The picture that I saw is just like the picture of the homeless Jesus, not to put a religious connotation on it. It's down the front of Regis College down in Toronto. It's a very famous sculpture. She laid flat, didn't get up. So I offered to take her to a motel. I offered to get her coffee, I offered to come into the office to get warm. She didn't want to be a bother. And so finally, I arranged to give her some money, as anyone would do, in order that she could get breakfast, maybe some food. I went into the office. I immediately contacted Choices because that's the only number that I knew might have a 24-hour assistance for someone like this. And the executive director explained that if she's over 24, they don't have anything for her. And I said, "I thought you were going to have a warming center." And she said, "No, there's no warming center at the Choices Center at the present time." I've contacted council, I've contacted the mayor, and I fully believe that council will do something concerning the warming center. I found out from my staff that there was another woman on the bench behind our building before Christmas. I didn't know about it. I didn't see it, even though I come in early in the morning, it must have been too dark. And staff had approached that individual to help her as well. What we're going to do ourselves, we're going to do something about this. We've arranged to get a tent. We've got a sleeping bag in the tent. We've got a warmer ceramic heater set up. I've contacted the OPP. I've told them that there's a tent there, not to be concerned about it. We've contacted Chubb Security. We're going to turn the vestibule of the front of our building into a warming center so that we can still have security for our office. We're a law firm, but I need to make sure that we have security in place. We're going to have another security zone in place. Hopefully that'll be there in a week's time. It's not much. But we have to do something. Council needs to take this seriously. We're going to have a death. A young woman lying on a bench in a back alleyway. She's not safe. We can do better than this in our community. So I would encourage council, when you're talking about a warming center, to make it a priority. You have a budget coming up. Put something in the budget for it. It should be at the Tony Rose Center. If you can't find the money for it, then let me know. Because others in the community will raise the funds to make sure that we have a warming center. Whatever we can do at our little shop is not adequate, but it's something. We have a great community. I believe council is committed to this, and I just want to encourage you, after a year, this is the time to do something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. I'm going to ask that you stay there for a moment. I was going to speak to this on new business, but perhaps I will turn it over to Mr. Osmond now to give an update on warming centers. I know he was doing a bit of research today after some dialogue that we had. Mr. Osmond.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you to the Speaker. It's needless to say, it's a very humanitarian issue, and I did have some great discussions today, and it's interesting what's transpired with the choices for youth. And as you know, you're absolutely correct. Last year, I brought a report back to council in great detail. There's some terminology you want to be very clear on up front. The Out of the Cold program, which is an overnight 24-hour program, compared to a warming center, which is what we're doing generally in the daytime, is Tony Rose is a good example, or Alder. We do have warming centers in the wintertime now because we do operate from 6 in the morning until 11 at night, sometimes 12. That we can do on a day-to-day basis, but our real problem is, you're right, after hours. And so I had a good discussion today with the county and with Anna McGregor, because we've talked about this issue at some length. And there was a concern that came up with some emails today about, the choices for youth. We're not set up to deal with the 24-hour out of the cold program. We discussed that today. There was issues with permits and opening a new center. A shelter, which has now been rectified and is taken care of. And they basically met all compliance issues today, and they do now have a permit for occupancy, which is a huge change for us right now. That being said, we've had discussions are ongoing right now with Choices for Youth to set up a 24-hour out of the cold program after hours at night. And hopefully that will satisfy that, but there's got to be a discussion to work out some of that detail. In the meantime, the instance where you find yourself dealing with individuals, I asked the same questions you did. I mean, who responds? Is it Choices for Youth? Is it the county? Is it police? Is there other agencies that respond? And there's quite a few agencies actually that work behind the county to respond to some of these situations. And I was told not always do a person want to be taken off the street or moved off the street, somewhere on the street, and prefer to be on the street, which is very difficult to fathom, but that actually happens. And there are underlying issues with lots of individuals with how they actually end up on the street. But from our perspective, we don't disagree with you. I mean, how do we take care of this challenge to get people off the street that are, and there's not a lot, but there are people that's showing up on your doorstep and maybe other doorsteps. So what we've done is we've started by dealing with the Choices for Youth, because last year we had discussions with Choices for Youth, the communication between what happened last year and what happens now. Unfortunately, I guess we're misinterpreted or whatever the case may be, but what we've done is we've had a discussion today, and it's now ongoing so that we can do something for some of these people to get them off the street at night. So they're not, they're out of the coal, and not so much a warming center, but out of the coal, which is a national program and is done by various agencies. Some are religious groups and so on and so forth. Some are not-for-profit groups, mostly not-for-profit groups, and some are run by cities and towns. So having said that, in the meantime, when you bring up the question around Tony Rose and the town being involved directly, running a out of the coal center, it is a discussion that we will want to take if something doesn't happen with Choices for Youth or something doesn't happen with the communication between ourselves, the county, and Choices for Youth. And that's pretty important because once we go down that road, we want to be very, very careful on what road we go down. Council generally or towns generally do not get directly involved. There are agencies that are delivering a lot of services that I'm not going to talk about here this evening, but I can assure you, and I've been assured, that all these agencies are doing a lot of work behind the scenes that we don't see or hear about that deal with some of these situations. I'm a little concerned when you say that you called the Choices for Youth, and there are other numbers. So I want to make sure, and I wanted to make sure today when I was talking to Anna McGregor, if there's some way for us to get numbers to the business community, you in particular, because you're right, you seem to have you're directly involved on we've had this conversation many times, and your location is a very primary location. As you said, you're next to the lighthouse, and that may be a reason for some of these people showing up around your property. And we want to make sure that there's some way for us to deal with them directly. If the right numbers are in the right hands, we want to make sure that happens. So there's people that are responding after hours to situations that come up either in the morning or late at night. There's a few other things that are going on. I want to be clear as well with Choices for Youth, because, and with all due respect, the Choices for Youth started to work on the shelter project last year. It took way longer than it should have been. The conversation we're having now should not happen. The conversation we're having was supposed to happen when they had the facility completed. It's taken until today to get the occupancy permit around that particular facility for Choices for Youth. We have a similar project that's going on with CHIP, and they're doing a renovation as well with the former motel up the street, and that too is running into a lot of difficulty with supply chains, labor, electrical issues, plumbing issues that they didn't know they're going to run into. And I can tell you that's being worked on as well diligently to try to get it finished. That too will enhance our response, if you would, the community's response to people that need shelter in Orangeville and beyond, quite frankly. So a lot of things are going on. It's timely. I guess we've been fairly fortunate that the weather has held off a little bit, Mr. Carter. And but we too are quite concerned about it as staff. The county is quite concerned about it. Choices now have been clearly engaged as of today to try to see how we can move this quite quickly. So I think we're in a good position right now. That's not to say that what you're doing shouldn't be done. I mean, I think that's a wonderful idea. If you can make that happen around your business, that's certainly your call. But we believe, and I believe, that the county is in the right position to respond, and they are. We have the communication now with ourselves, Choices for Youth, and the county, and hopefully we can get this matter straightened out quickly.
Mr. Osmond, may I ask one additional question to your comment, and then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Carter, who I believe has comment. When it comes to Choice's new facility, will that be able to accommodate women as well, or is it only set up for men at this point?
At this stage, there's more spaces for men, but there are 2 spaces for women. So it's interesting. I think Mr. Carter made a comment that they had to be under the age of 24, and I made note of that because I want to make sure what we're looking at here is not going to be restricted to a certain age, because we do have an issue to, I think the spaces all told, there's 8 beds in this facility, so we'll take a look at how that works.
Mr. Osmond, just to be clear, there is kind of 2 separate areas. So there's Choices Youth Center that deals with the youth, and then their new component is the men's homeless shelter, which is what I want to be clear that they are going to accommodate women in that facility as well. I think that's an important piece.
Yes, Your Worship. My understanding is there's two shelter spaces for women and 6 for men.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carter, I'll turn it back over to you and then to council for any comments.
That's not what the executive director of Choices told me this morning. And by the way, I'm not here speaking on behalf of Choices. I'm just relating information. So I was told that when the men's shelter opens up, it's for men, not for women. And they do not have space for women over 24. The issue of a warming center, it's to have something available 24 hours a day in cold weather. Asking the churches to do it, they're going to have difficulty getting the staff, they're going to have difficulty getting the insurance in place for it. This is a responsibility of the municipality to provide shelter or warmth during these cold months. It's been a year, Mr. Osmond, a year, and there's nothing in place. The committee recommended January of last year that the town staff be instructed to look into having a warming center at the Tony Rose, and nothing has happened. That is not acceptable. So I would encourage council, this is your area, it's not mine. There's something that should be done. And if the money is the issue, then the community will stand up and raise the funds for it if you're concerned about paying staff at municipal facilities. In the meantime, I'll do what I can, but it's not adequate. It's simply not adequate in this town.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Mr. Osmond, did you have additional comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. No further comment. I've listened quite attentively to your comments, Mr. Carter, and I share your concern. And the timeframes between January last year and now, unfortunately, for right or wrong, the fact is that we did have a conversation, a communication with Choices for Youth, and the staff that we're talking to today are a little different than the staff we talked to, unfortunately, and we clarified that today. And it is something that we are having discussions with right now as we speak, but it's going to carry on tomorrow. And I'm hoping that we can get this matter clearly put on the right track in the next few hours, tomorrow and the next day. And again, I'm working with the county on that. And I think that's the county's role, is to support the town and put us on the right track and get this issue dealt with. And, if we will continue, by the way, to have a warming center at our facilities up until the hours we're open. And whatever happens after tomorrow, working with Choices for Youth in the county, I'll bring that back to council and give you a further report.
Very much, Mr. Osmond. Was there additional questions from members of council? Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Your Worship. Not a question, but more of a comment. And for those of us who were part of the previous Men's Homelessness Committee, Councillor Sherwood and myself, Mr. Carter, I want to thank you very much for being here. I understand the emotional points that have been stressed. Mr. Osmond has been very clear. We have been enormously frustrated with the delays. We can't say anything more than just that. For the audience that is not only watching us, be that virtually, but the audience that happens to be in the gallery, it was very clear that Mr. Osmond identified the process that exists. We understand. Is the process broken? Is it ideal? It is the process we have to work with at this time. We understand we have some individuals in our community that, for whatever reason, I think it happens to be because of the close proximity of the lighthouse. We know that you have been most gracious. Your staff have been most gracious in supporting, but we've got to fix a problem. And if the process is, as Mr. Osmond's very clear, part of it is mental health agencies are involved, individuals who do not accept offerings of support, we really can't change that. We do our best. We've had different individuals who've spoken even at the Men's Homelessness Committee over a number of months who've emphasized that. I think the point that I wanted to stress is the fact that we are aware of this. Members of council are very much aware of this, staff are aware of this, and we're hoping that the delays that have been announced here will be solved, and we will hopefully have something in place that will end up solving this problem in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews, and thank you, Mr. Carter. We will be in touch as more information comes from the future. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Carter. Again, being on the committee, as you mentioned, over a year ago, we brought this to staff to look at. I've had lots of other thoughts about this, and I think the county and working in partnership with organizations that have the trained staff. I worry a little bit about this going to, say, the arena and us having arena staff or a security guard that may not be professionally trained for any type of vulnerable type of person that may come. So I am really hopeful that we can get into some kind of partnership with people that provide that type of counseling as well, because again, we have to protect our employees as well. I wholeheartedly feel your frustration. I too have mentioned the warming center many times over the last year of my term of council. And, you know, here we are again in January, the most coldest months coming up, and we still haven't any solutions for this. I did have a brief conversation today with Choices, and I may be overstepping what may or may not be known yet, but the youth are moving to the new facility that was given an occupancy permit today. The men will be moving to the youth facility further down the road. I was told that that facility can accommodate the men at the top and that the bottom floor can house up to 16 people and possibly could be used as a warming center. So I'd like to leave it in the hands of the county and the staff to work possibly with Choices. I know, Mr. Carter, that your passion is for us to have it open up a town facility and the you know, the Tony Rose maybe for you know, geographical location. I just worry about the safety of our staff and us not having those type of professionals on hand. But again, believe me, this is something I too am very passionate about as well, and I thank you.
Councillor Sherwood, it was your recommendation a year ago to have the Tony Rose used as a warming center.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I did at that time. But again, I'm worried about the types of vulnerable people that may come in there that have more needs than just somebody looking for a bed that may be under some kind of addiction or mental health issues. And that has come more to my knowledge now that we do need professionals. So yes, you're absolutely right. You called me out on that, and that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions before we carry on? No. Mr. Carter, thank you very much. And over the coming days, we'll have some additional information coming from Mr. Osmond, and we'll be in touch. Thank you for being here tonight. We will move on now to item 12.1, which is discussing the water billing overages. There's a recommendation in the report, or recommendation in the agenda, that report INS 2023-003 water billing overages be received, and that the water and wastewater bill adjustment policy be amended to include industrial, commercial, and institutional properties. Before we move on to having a mover and a seconder for that, we should have our conversation regarding 11.2 and 11.3, those delegates. And maybe I'll turn it over to Mr. Koslak to give some recommendations and conversation. Mr. Koslak?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to explain a little bit about the water meters first before we start. Right now we have a mechanical water meter. So the water comes in, and inside the meter there's almost a cup. It fills, it turns, lets the water go through. So the water physically has to flow through the meter to turn the meter. It won't just change on its own. It's like the speedometer on your car. If the wheels aren't turning, the speedometer doesn't change. It's the same with the water meter. If anything, when the meters get older, they'll underread. So as the parts wear a little bit, the water will work its way around, so it won't all go in the cup and turn it. So you will get less efficient meter. You might get 10% of the water flowing through it without being read. I also wanted to clarify, I guess Jim had mentioned about the property being billed after it was being knocked down. And just wanted to clarify, although the bill is sent out November 17th, the reading is done from September 20th to October 23rd. So there would have been, I don't know, 15, 20 days where the building was operating. One of the big things we find with a lot of places where there are leaks, it's quite often toilets, either the overflow in the back or the flapper. Once they age with the chlorine in the water, it almost becomes a clam shape, and you'll have water flowing through there.
And sometimes if you have water flowing through for months, it adds up to a lot of water. Or sometimes if you flush the toilet and the flapper stays up, you can use an awful lot of water in one day. We've also found otherwise people have problems sometimes with water softeners. There's been problems where they stick on automatic recharge, and that can use an awful lot of water in a short period of time. So right now the town has a forgiveness policy that allows staff to forgive up to $2,000 or 50% of the overage from the average based on the repairs being done to the water system. Our recommendation is to include the industrial commercial properties in that as well, just so we don't have to have everything coming to council. These two are a little bit unique as the property owners don't think there was any issue with the plumbing. So it is a unique one from our policy. So we wanted to be able to bring it forward. And I also attached a copy of the policy just as information for everybody to be able to look at it and see.
Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
Yes, to you, Your Worship, to Mr. Koslak. Is there any chance at all that underground there could be any type of crack or break that could just cause a slow leak that doesn't come up through the ground, you know, puddling?
Mr. Koslak?
Through Your Worship, actually in a former life I had that problem. Somebody had an in-ground sprinkler they didn't know they owned. And they had leakage in their sprinkler system that they didn't even know after they bought the house. I think it's a rarity that that happens. Typically it's usually more a toilet or water softener problems, but I have had experience where that's been the issue.
Councillor Stevens.
Through you, Your Worship, more of a comment. When I first moved to Orangeville 20 years ago, I had a very similar issue, and the Orangeville Hydro actually found, I guess they were looking at the bills, wondering why. They actually called me and said, I think there's something wrong with your water system, so we're going to come out and have a look. So Public Works, Hydro come out, and the meter outside and the meter inside weren't reading the same, and I ended up getting a credit back of $4,000. So I think these things do happen. I certainly don't have the answers, so but I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Taylor and then Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Koslak. Such a unique situation here and a lot of money. What do you think that we should do?
Mr. Koslak.
I guess one of the things, these are unique situations. We don't usually have many. We'll get a few residential ones, but typically it's where somebody says, my water softener went and it's going through a lot of water. And I think too, this is kind of a short-term issue. One of the things we're looking town-wide at replacing all the water meters. The new meters we're getting will have a leak detection. So if somebody's continually using water for a 24-hour period every 15 minutes, we'll be able to flag it, and hopefully we can set it up with the system so even the residents can sign up and get a flag. So hopefully this will be a short-term issue. When we get all the meters replaced in the next 2 years, we won't have that problem again. So you may want to have consideration being their local businesses to be able to support them as sort of a one-off item.
Follow up, yep.
So you apologize, you gave us more information, but you didn't answer the question. Like, what do you think we should do regarding these two things? Would you have guidance for us and how to resolve this for these two residents?
Mr. Koslak.
If that's unfair, just say you don't want to answer, but
no, I guess
we're going to have to make a decision here, right?
Yeah. The policy for the residential is to waive up to 50% of the meter or 50% of the cost to a maximum of $2,000. I think for a lot of residential, it's fair. I think for the one property, it's a fair bit over it. So we may want to consider a one-time consideration to waive the higher amount. I think the 50% is a reasonable item. I think it's a bit of pain on all sides and something to consider. That's what sort of my recommendation would be.
Thank you, Mr. Koslak. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Taylor, for your question, very similar to what I was going to pose to Mr. Koslak. And I also appreciate the time that you've spoken to the individuals, in particular Mr. Travato, regarding his situation. It is an anomaly. It is literally close to where Centennial Road, where major construction took place. And, you know, I take a look at the information that he provided, which was very clear that there is something wrong that needs to be corrected. And I appreciate the comment that you made that, you know, as much as the recommendation here in the staff report would allow up to 50% or $2,000 if there was an industrial or a residential example, I still think that this particular situation requires a little more sensitivity and, looking at a way that there is a resolution that is acceptable by both parties involved.
One question, Mr. Koslak, is if council proceeds with waiving a percentage or the full amount of these bills, would that be paid through water rates, that reserve? Or do I need to turn it over to Madam Treasurer for that?
I believe it would just be rebated from our water account where we receive the accounts receivable. So it would just be rebated out of that.
Perfect, thank you. Was there additional questions? Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we should tread very carefully with this. If we do it for one, we need to do it for all. So just a caution that we need to tread cautiously. Thank you.
Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Again, to the point, Your Worship, through the Deputy Mayor and also to Councillor McIntosh, I absolutely agree. But again, I was looking for some guidance here from Mr. Koselleck. And so there's that fine line. But we do have what I stress is a very unusual situation, one that I clearly believe is an anomaly. There's something that has gone awry.
Councillor Andrews, are you ready to make a motion then?
I will make a motion.
What would you like your motion to be?
Well, I think the motion, as per the suggestion by General Manager Koselleck, if there is a way that we can waive a percentage that is mutually agreed between the two parties that is acceptable, I would believe that that would be a motion that hopefully would be approved by other members of council. I don't know what that sweet spot is.
Mr. Koselleck, we look to you for guidance.
For Your Worship, I guess right now it's 50% for the residential, and that's sort of what we'd recommend, but it's up to council if they'd like to consider waiving more, being they are local businesses.
Councillor Andrews?
Well, I'm not sure what the individual would be willing to. Is there, are we looking at full amount? Are we looking at 80%? I don't know what would be deemed to be acceptable by the party involved, or please.
Come on up, sir. Just make sure you turn on the mic and please come back up to the delegation desk. You turn on the mic, please, just to make sure everybody can hear you. There's a little button there that says mic.
Technology.
Oh, speak, is that what it says? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wrote that letter. I thought I was being more than fair. I know it's like this gentleman saying, it's a slippery slope, okay? But I'm willing to give you a year of water bill. I think that's more than fair. Like the meter sit, like as far as mechanical, I'm a mechanic, okay? Things get jammed. It doesn't mean they read less instead of more. That's crap, okay? But a year's worth of water, I think it was more than fair here. Like,
Councillor Andrews, how do you want to proceed with that?
If this is what the
I'm using 0.3 to 0.7, maybe 1 cubic meter, okay, of water. You're talking now it goes to from 0.3 to 52. Where is this water? Like, there's not even a drop of water outside the place. Like that, it's a swimming pool, man.
Reversing him for his money.
Like,
That's a lot of water.
Like,
I think
I don't think most people pay $700 for water in a year. I'm going to give you that as just a, get me the heck out of here kind of money. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, for sure.
I know this gentleman is thinking, get 50% or like, that's a lot of money for water, man.
Thank you, sir.
I'm just frustrated.
Yeah,
I understand.
understandably.
You want me to shut this off now?
Yes, please. Thank you. Councillor Deputy Mayor Taylor has a suggestion. Go ahead.
I'm not sure we're going to get out of this fair and equitably, and I think we're all worried about what it would mean to us if we created a precedent. But regardless, I think about the water and the amount here for Mr. Treado. I'm speaking, sir. Speaking. It's $11,000. I think that would sink the average Canadian. So I don't mind the suggestion of the 1 year. I don't know how we can even go at 50%. It's $5,500. $5,500 would mean a lot to my family, and this seems like it's a mistake. So I don't know, guys, if we were to saw off and do something around a year mark, which would be about $1,000, that means you're rebating between $9,500 and $10,000. And that's this gentleman on 19 Stewart Court. 62 Broadway, the bills are high, but they're not $11,000. So I don't know if you stick to a similar policy on it, but maybe we look at them separately. So perhaps I put a motion out on Stewart Court that, and I'll put it out for debate. We say that we'll recover $9,500 of the amount and $1,500 would be to the resident or to the business owner at 19 Stewart Court. And then perhaps we talk about 62 Broadway separately.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Andrews? So what that would mean is that this gentleman would be responsible for $1,500 worth of the bill and the rest of the town would cover, correct? Okay, just want to make sure. Was there questions or comments on that? Yeah, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Are we also addressing to include the commercial industrial in the future since we only have it covered under residential?
That is the item at 12.1. So we'll deal with each of the two delegates separately and then we'll do a third motion for 12.1.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Did we have a seconder for that? Councillor Andrews did. Was there any further discussion or question on that item? Councillor Sherwood, do you have something else to say?
Okay, yes, I thought I had his documentation in front of me. Again, sir, your typical, what was your highest month under your typical bill? Like what do you typically pay as the highest amount? Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Taylor.
There's also the emotional duress of what's happened here. Like, I'm just trying to round off. Nobody has any idea what this gentleman's bill is because it's wrong. So my suggestion is the 9,500, let's just saw it off. Let's apologize. Let's move forward with this gentleman and be done. It's 11,000.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has an $11,000 hydro water bill.
No. Okay, everybody good? Any other questions before we vote on that one? Or I will call the vote. Everybody in favor, please say aye. Yep, carried. Yes, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Can we move on to 62 Broadway? 62 Broadway, the amounts are not as extreme. I mean, it's still an upsetting experience for sure. But, you know, as I look through the amounts and my screen's just gone blank as that's happened, but they're just not as high. So my suggestion would be as we move forward with what Mr. Koslak has offered, and that's the 50%. And we call this one a day as well.
Can I get a seconder for that motion? Councillor McIntosh, any further discussion on that one? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 12.1 now, which is the original recommendation in the report, is that report INS-2023-003, water billing overages be received, and that water and wastewater bill adjustment policy be amended to include industrial, commercial, and institutional properties. Can I have a motion for that, please? Councillor Stevens and Councillor Sherwood. Any discussion on that item? Councillor Sherwood?
Is it recommendation of staff as well to amend the capping amount of $2,000, Mr. Koslak?
Mr. Koslak?
Through you, Worship. Right now, we'd recommend leaving as the $2,000 to be consistent with the residential policy. If there is a higher dollar value such as this, we may have to bring it back to council. It just gives staff the authority. 90% of the ones that come in we'll be able to address, so it does reduce any coming to council. So we'd recommend that dollar value, just so if it's a huge dollar value, if it's a $10,000, $20,000 bill, then we can bring it back for council's consideration. But talking to other staff, it's a very, very rarity something like this happens. So I don't think you'll probably see another high bill ever again, because we will be going to the ones that notify everybody of usage.
Thank you, Mr. Koslak. Does that answer your question, Councillor Sherwood? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 12.2 is the Parks and Events Bylaw, CMS-2022-21. There's a recommendation in the agenda that report CMS 2022-21, the Parks and Events Bylaw, be received, and that a public meeting be held on February 13th, 2023 at 7 p.m. to obtain input from the public on the proposed parks and events bylaw. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Was there any questions or comments on this item? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So I'm looking through the document, and it speaks to fireworks on quite a few occasions. Is this where we're going to be having a firework bylaw, Ms. Landry, or how would we pursue? Like, there's some things in here that talks about not using fireworks and pyrotechnics and whatnot, or is there a different bylaw coming forward for fireworks? Because we have talked about that.
My understanding is that the fireworks bylaw is still separate. This would just be fireworks pertaining to special events, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Landry for clarification.
That's exactly correct.
So this would just be with special event permits and film permits that require pyrotechnics or fireworks. The separate public fireworks and use of fireworks in public facilities would be dealt with under the fireworks bylaw.
Okay, Your Worship, if I may. So frequently residents are having gatherings, specifically Canada Day gatherings, street parties, that sort of thing. Is that a special event? And if that's a special event, based on what I read here, they can't have fireworks, correct?
Ms. Landry?
You can have, with this draft bylaw, you can have fireworks if it's subject to a permit, and that activity has been approved as part of that permit.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor. Yep.
Thank you. Through you again to Ms. Landry. So the person that is running the event and has the firework person there, that firework person has to be licensed to run the fireworks, right? Which means we're saying neighborhood parties are out because people aren't going to get firework permits. They're not going to be registered to run. You know, I'm not going to have a Zionist Street party, and I'm not going to have that skill set, right? So I'm not going to have a party.
I think I think there's a difference between the type of fireworks that you're using. I'm going to term them as consumer versus display fireworks, or which are sometimes used as low hazard versus high hazard fireworks, which is something I think that needs to be addressed through our fireworks bylaw, as Mayor Post has indicated. This is particularly dealing with having fireworks on town lands. So, and if you're having a special event or a film production, there's a process where we will allow you to set off fireworks on town lands, provided you get this particular type of permit. With respect to the fireworks bylaw itself, I think we're getting into the area where you're dealing with people setting off fireworks on their own lands.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. Did I cover it, Deputy Mayor?
So if I may, Your Worship, so again, what people are doing is they're closing down streets. They get the ability to do that. They're having it in the middle of whatever street it is. Spencer Avenue is shut down and they're having a fireworks party. That's public property and they're not going to be allowed to do that moving forward if we put this through, correct?
They would be subject to a special event permit, and depending on the type of fireworks that are being used, they may be required then to have a fireworks technician, I'm going to call it for the lack of a better word, and the proper certification for that individual to set off those type of fireworks. But again, it depends on whether you're dealing with low hazard versus high hazard fireworks.
Just
versus consumer.
And just to add some clarity to that too, Deputy Mayor, is that currently under our current bylaw, there's only permissions to set off fireworks on Canada Day, and I think that's the only one, right?
Actually, that's correct.
Yeah. And Victoria Day, and Victoria Day. It's just the 2 days that you're allowed to do fireworks anyways under our current bylaw. So that hasn't changed at all. This is just adding the opportunity to have special event permits that would permit you to do that, which right now is currently prohibited.
I'm very sorry to be slow this evening, but so I'm going to go, let's just all walk with me. I'm going to walk over to the beer store on Canada Day. I'm going to go into Bob's Fireworks. I'm going to buy fireworks. I'm going to have my closed event on X Street here in Orangeville. I'm not licensed. All of my neighbors are going to be there, and I can't do that, can I?
And that's something that currently falls under our fireworks bylaw.
Not this one.
Not this one.
Can I do that?
Well, I'd have to again look at the fireworks bylaw. Deputy Mayor Taylor, I don't believe that they can set them off on town lands, if I'm recalling correctly off the top of my head. And as we bring this forward, the fire department has been intricately involved in this particular process. And I do know that they understand that we do have to look at the fireworks bylaw separately, because I think there are some other days that are of interest in terms of permitting residents to set off fireworks. So right now, this one is particularly dealing with setting them off on town lands as part of a permit process.
And Ms. Khan, can you just clarify too, is our fireworks bylaw coming to council this year as well?
Madam Mayor, yeah, it is not. I can double check which year it's coming.
Okay, thank you very much.
So if I may again, I think we're heading towards confusion and it's coming up quickly. So Victoria Day is going to be here, Canada Day is going to be here, and I worry what that's going to mean. There's confusion each year anyway, and there's complaints each year anyway. And to be clear, I could care less about the issue. I'm not on left or right of this issue. I just want clarity to make sure if people want to be able to do it, they should either be able to do it or not be able to do it. And right now, I think it's confusing whether or not they can do it.
Hopefully this bylaw will add some clarity to that, because currently with our film industry as well, they've been looking for pyrotechnics, and according to our current fireworks bylaw, it's not permitted. So this will help add some clarity to that side of it. Ms. Landry?
May I just suggest perhaps it would be helpful as part of our presentation at the public meeting with respect to this bylaw. We'll also include information as it relates to our current fireworks bylaw and what each has jurisdiction over and what they do and they do not permit. Would that be helpful at that juncture?
I think that would be very helpful. And I think that would help to clarify. Ms. Khan, did you come up with an answer too? Perfect.
So just to add clarity around the date, currently the fireworks bylaw is set to be reviewed in 2025. That's unless, I guess, unless the fire department deems it appropriate to bring it up earlier.
Okay, thank you. Was there any additional questions? Councillor Prendergast and then Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Osmond. I'd be curious to know how many special events permits have been requested for street parties that fall on the dates that fireworks are permitted. So just to see how many residents might be put out by this if it is unclear.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Prendergast. Well, first off, it's one of the reasons why we're having this debate. It's quite frankly, we don't issue permits for consumer fireworks. We issue permits for display fireworks for Canada Day and for Victoria Day. And as Deputy Mayor Taylor suggests, if a organization, neighborhood organization, I'll call it, want to have a event, what this policy does, what the parks policy does, or the special events policy does, is protects the town for a neighborhood that wants to use town property to have an event. And then if you want to have fireworks as part of that event, you have to have a display fireworks at that event. The concern we have and what's happening in a lot of municipalities is there's a concern with consumer fireworks and no control. So it means you can have, they're not just having fireworks on Victoria Day and Canada Day, and we still have those, and our fire services team had to respond to quite a few, and police that are consumer driven. But when you get into display, we have no issues with display fireworks at all. We have permits for that, we have proper technicians and so on and so forth. The consumer side of things is that what we're trying to protect here is a community when it comes to liability on town property. And as GM suggests, when it comes to consumers on their own property, we use the fireworks bylaw. And what fire and police does, they have to go out and enforce it because, as the mayor says, right now under our current policy, you can't set fireworks off in the town of Orangeville unless it's those 2 days. So that's why I think it'd be really good exercise, as Ms. Landry suggests, and we go through the public consultation processes to make it very clear on what's going on. I will tweak to the clerk is that it could be possible if there's a big issue that comes out of the fireworks that we could still open up the fireworks bylaw and amend something, have a discussion around an amendment while we're still working on a complete overview and a review of the fireworks bylaw.
Very helpful, Mr. Osmond. Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, a question to Ms. Landry. As for insurance, now this kind of parlays to some of the questions that have been posed. So I know more will be discussed at the February 13th public meeting, and I think that this is where much of this will be cultivated. But very quickly, the process for identifying and confirming insurance coverage for volunteers, that definition of volunteers can be quite broad. So for our sake, is the process that individuals who may be putting on a special event, what do they have to do? And also the list of volunteers, because that can also, the ebbs and flows of volunteerism can change too. So would it be a blanket insurance coverage on the individuals participating?
Ms. Landry?
Okay, that's a bit of a loaded question, Councillor Andrews, but essentially we've structured the bylaw, if I can say it this way, we've structured the bylaw in a way that depending on the activities that are taking place, staff will make a determination on the insurance that is to be provided. And in every case, the town's to be named as an additional insured. If the activities warrant that the insurance amount is to be greater than what's stipulated in the bylaw provides that staff can ask for a higher amount based on that activity. And for example, I'll use if they're an event where they're not using pyrotechnics versus an event that they are, the amount of the insurance coverage that will be sought by staff will increase based on that particular type of activity. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Was there any additional questions from members of council? Councillor Stevens?
Through you, Your Worship. Camping. It was for like Ribfest camping on town property. I believe you don't want that through this bylaw. What about the people who are working the event? Are they still allowed to camp at the Ribfest in a trailer? I didn't see that anywhere.
Mr. Osmond or Ms. Landry? Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Stevens, that's a good question. When it comes to vendors and when it comes to the actual operation of Ribfest is a good example. And there's vendors on site that have accommodations as part of their trailers. That's part of the event. What the bylaw speaks to is the idea that if you want to set up tents on Lions Park or on the ball field near, say Bravery Park as an example, in that open space, that's a different altogether. We have another area would be with film crews. I mean, film crews could be living in accommodations on the street while the filming is going on because they're doing filming at night, early morning, and all this would be wrapped around their actual request for a permit. And now we issued a permit based on each individual event. But camping, we do not want camping in our facilities unless we have to issue a permit and make it a special event, and there be certain things around that. But camping is not permitted as it stands.
Okay. Any further questions before we call the vote? We have a mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor?
Just as clarity, so all we're doing is saying this is going to go to a public meeting, and then we're going to get feedback back on it anyway. So all we're doing is receiving the document and saying we're going to wait for the public feedback, which is great. So I'm happy to vote in favor, but if we were voting tonight, I'd be concerned. So
both public meetings.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that we're all clear on what we're voting on. Thank you.
Excellent. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Next up, we have the outdoor patio display of merchandise bylaw. The recommendation is that report CMS 2023-01 outdoor patio display of merchandise bylaws be received, and that council pass a bylaw amending the outdoor boulevard cafe bylaw as outlined within this report for the period of April 1st to October 31st on an annual basis, with a maximum of 6 parking spaces permitted for extended outdoor cafes issued on a first-come, first-served basis, and that council pass a bylaw amending the display of merchandise bylaw as outlined within this report for the period of April 1st to October 31st on an annual basis, and that planning staff be directed to amend outdoor boulevard cafe and display of merchandise bylaws, guidelines, applications, and permits accordingly. Can I have a mover, please? Deputy Mayor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Was there any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And carried unanimously. Next up, 12.4, 2023 interim tax levy. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-01 in 2023 interim tax levy be received, and that council pass a bylaw to provide for the levy and collection of interim taxes required. Can I have a motion, please? Deputy Mayor Taylor, Councillor Andrews, any questions? No questions. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Item 12.5, 2023 interim borrowing. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-002, 2023 interim borrowing be received, and that council pass a bylaw to authorize external temporary borrowing in 2023. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Stevens and Councillor Sherwood. Any questions? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Madam Treasurer. Give you a second to get on board there. There's no mention in the report regarding the interest rates, whether we would be locked into a fixed rate, a variable rate, and do you feel that there will be a need for us to have to borrow, and at what interest rate are we looking at?
Ms. Syed?
Your Worship, to Councillor Sherwood. So this is a very standard report that we bring in every year. So the idea behind the interim borrowing is, should we fail to do our interim taxes and we have zero cash flow, this is the money that we fall back on. In my 17 years, I've never seen a municipality actually borrow money, the interim, or use the interim borrowing to fund its day-to-day operation. So that said, the interest rate would be whatever the rate is of the day that we actually take the loan.
Councillor Sherwood, Your Worship, thank you. I was under the impression that we have never used it as just a security, that if we do need it, right? And if in fact we do, I would hope that you would actually bring that back as to how much we had to actually pay in borrowing costs, if and when that ever happened, correct?
Ms. Hyde?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Your Worship.
Oh, sorry.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Sherwood, that is absolutely correct. I would be bringing that information as an FYI.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Was there any additional questions? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Item 12.6 is the 2022 Municipal and School Board Election Accessibility Report. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-003 2022 Municipal and School Board Election Accessibility Report be received. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews and Councillor Prendergast, was there any questions? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the staff report on this, and I'm wondering if there's any further consideration of alternative ways for voting. I like the idea of the voting at home. It did provide options for those that weren't able to attend the voting locations. As we know, we had a decline in the number of people who voted in this municipal election. And anything we can do to encourage people to vote in the 2026 election would be a priority of mine. So if there are alternative ways, I think we've spoken offline about internet as an option. Other municipalities have considered that. So Madam Clerk, if maybe you can provide a response and an update.
Ms. Khan?
Absolutely, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it's become quite clear that council is interested in identifying alternate voting methods, and that's certainly on our radar as a result. Obviously, internet voting is one that comes to mind pretty quickly. With technology, we have more options with respect to internet voting and other ways that we can leverage technology. At the time that we brought the report to council for council to decide to pursue vote tabulators, we did mention in that report in the previous term of council that following this 2022 election, staff would take back the mandate to conduct a public engagement exercise in 2024, I believe it was, we noted in that report, to survey the residents of the town and see what their interest is in leveraging additional technology, what their interest is in internet voting, how they see vote tabulators working for them, so on and so forth, and any additional programs such as the Vote at Home program. So yes, absolutely, it is something that is on our radar, and unfortunately, yes, the voter turnout was low across the province, and it's something that we would certainly like to focus on to try to increase for future elections. So definitely, I would say that all options would be considered and brought to the attention of council for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Was there additional questions? No, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Next up is item 12.7, which is the terms of reference for the 2022 to 2026 committees of council. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-04 terms of reference 2022 to 2026 committees of council be received, and that council approve the terms of reference included in attachments 1 to 12 to this report for Access Orangeville Committee, Committee of Adjustment, Economic Development and Culture Committee, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Fire Services Advisory Committee, Heritage Orangeville Committee, Homelessness Task Force, Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, Official Plan Steering Committee, Property Standards Dog Designation, Seniors Advisory Committee or Age Friendly Advisory Committee, and Sustainable Orangeville Committee, and that staff continue with recruitment of committee and board volunteers and provide applications to council for consideration by March 6, 2023 council meeting, and that the clerk or their designate be appointed to the Dufferin Provincial Offences Administration Board of Management. Before I call for a mover and a seconder for that, I just wanted to make a couple of comments, just some conversation that I had with Ms. Khan earlier today. There is two of the committees right now that show 2 members of council. Right now, we only have 1. When we go to nominate residents to be a part of that, we can assign a second member of council at that time. We don't need to do that today. One of the additional comments is that for the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, currently it does state age 16 to 20. I have asked Ms. Khan to amend that to be an earlier age to allow all high school age students up to the age of 20 to participate. So those would be a couple of changes that would be made in there. Additionally, Sustainable Orangeville Committee have sent some comments from the previous committee on ways that we can adjust the terms of reference to be a little more robust. I can turn it over to Mr. Osmond to maybe provide some of those changes or comments. But the recommendation right now is that we receive the terms of reference as is, proceed with recruitment, and then at the same time on March 6th, Ms. Khan will come back with an updated terms of reference for us at that time. So I can call for a mover and a seconder on this item. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Mr. Osmond, did you want to provide clarity on the Sustainable Orangeville piece?
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't go into any detail because I think you're absolutely correct. Based on the comments that we received from the former committee, we'd like to take it back and review a couple of items and tweak a couple of items. One in particular that came back from the committee is the discussion around they have a reserve fund that was set up for sustainable projects, and one of the things we want to do, that terms of reference really doesn't speak clearly to. It speaks to initiatives that will improve environment and sustainable environment and all these kinds of good things, but around finance or around providing grants to communities, as an example, Rotary Club might want to do a tree planting initiative. This committee would have the ability to review an application from an organization to do an environmental initiative, and there would be able to extend a small grant, or the case would be for a particular project. And I think that was something that we had discussed back a few months ago, and we want to revisit that and see if we can clarify in the terms of reference how it might work. There is a question around advisory versus hands-on, if you would, and there's a lot of hands-on work that gets done, but primarily it's getting done by staff through perks. And I think what we're trying to do is we'll probably clean up some of the wording around that, so that the Sustainable Orangeville Committee will do maybe the grant program, as well as still do provide the advisory piece on projects that might come up. It might be great initiatives for the community, or to give council some feedback on their direction or what their recommendation would be on a particular initiative that might come up that council might want some direction on from a volunteer group. So that would be a way for us to deal with some of the items that came up. I think the terms of reference is broad enough, but there's some areas that came from the discussion we had with the former chair that I think we should capture. And it wouldn't take a lot for us to do that. We could have that ready for later in January, and we still be able to go ahead and continue with the recruitment, but we could clarify a couple of things in terms of references that comes up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osmond. Was there any questions from members of council? Councillor Stevens, then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you to your worship, but I'm not really sure who to ask. But I've been asked by many residents, why don't we have a recreation committee?
I will turn that over to Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's a good question. A few years ago in the previous council, we captured a lot of the things that go on in recreation as driven by staff and by projects that come up, and they have these standalone committees and feedback on. Culture is an example. We basically made that part of economic development. We did other things that we're doing in the community as part of libraries, and so on and so forth. But the feedback from staff on the recreation side was that it's really staff driven for the most part. The committee of the day came back and made the same recommendation that maybe we don't need a committee. When we had meetings, staff were doing a lot of the input, similar to what you're hearing now, I guess, from Sustainable Orange Bill, is a lot of things are still staff driven. And we made a decision back in the day to take recreation committee off the table and let staff bring reports in, master plans, those kinds of things, and deal with it that way at the council level, because it is a large part of the organization, a large part of community services, if you would, and it has a lot of moving parts, a lot of contracts and agreements. And some of these things were seen as more staff-driven to bring directly to council and not have a committee, if you would, in between. So it would be just a straight to council kind of a discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond. I would just add as well that the Access Orangeville Committee does often provide feedback to recreation for more accessible programming and things like that as well. So that committee does have some input in that as well.
Thank you.
No problem. Councillor McIntosh.
It's for you, worship staff. Could someone tell me how and when the public positions will be advertised?
I will leave that to Ms. Khan.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to provide the Deputy Clerk, Ms. McDonald, an opportunity to give that answer. She has been intricately involved in all of the planning of the recruitment and worked really hard on this report. So I would like to give her an opportunity to provide some comments.
Perfect. Ms. McDonald, over to you.
Through you, Mayor Post, to Councillor McIntosh. We'll be hosting a committee fair. We have tentatively set that for January the 25th, working in consultation with communications to facilitate that. The idea surrounding a committee fair is, as outlined in the previous report that came to council, just an effort to better align the interests and skills of community volunteers with the appropriate committee, just so that they're utilized to both our advantage as well as their own. We do, pending council's approval of the terms of reference this evening, we will begin with our advertisement through social channels, again, with the assistance of Mallory and her communications team. That should wrap up beginning of February, and then we'll compile that report for council and bring that back to you for your appointment.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Will people have the opportunity to apply starting this month, though, for people who want to reapply to committees they've already been a part of? Will that application process open right away?
That should open by the end of the week, yes.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question? Perfect. Was there additional questions on this item? Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Can I call the vote, please? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Item 12.8 is the vaccination policy review. The recommendation in the agenda is that report CPS 2023-006 vaccination policy review be received, and that council suspend the COVID-19 vaccination policy for participating individuals and the COVID-19 vaccination policy for members of council, local boards, and committees effective January 10th, 2023. Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've changed the motion. Well, the town has changed the motion with my consulting. I'll give an explanation after I read out what I currently have. That council suspend the COVID-19 vaccination policy for participating individuals, with the exception of fire personnel, and that COVID-19 vaccination policy for members of council, local boards, and committee effective January 10th, 2023, and that the report and the staff report back to council in April 2023 regarding the exception to the suspension of the COVID-19 policy for fire personnel. You may wonder why fire personnel, and I have a few reasons here. Currently, there is a COVID outbreak at both the Lord Dufferin and the Avalon. Firefighters enter these buildings. Can I speak, please?
Excuse me, I'll have to ask for quiet from the gallery, please.
Firefighters enter these buildings on a regular basis, not just for medical calls, but for fire alarms. There's a vulnerable population there that we want to protect. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
just like the homeless people. It's all to do with your little vaccination policy and staffing issues with everything. And you guys just keep it going and going and going. Put your swastikas on.
Excuse me, sir. That's enough. Thank you. Carry on, Councillor McIntosh.
Put it on your forehead.
Carry on, Councillor McIntosh.
Staff in these places also have to be vaccinated, and that is not changing anytime soon. Also, we have to look after the firefighters' safety. If one person gets it, they can't work from home. The whole shift will be off, and we have a lot of problems with that. I believe we gave you the courtesy. We gave you.
Councillor McIntosh. We're going to call a recess, please. Call a recess, please. We're going to try this again. I know this is a passionate issue, and I'm please asking all members of the gallery to please be respectful while members of council are speaking. We will proceed with our conversation. Councillor McIntosh, back over to you to finish what you were saying, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, this is just a proposed motion. It can be debated by council. So just so you know. I named a lot of issues. I don't know if you heard them as to why I believe the fires should be separated. And I think the number one issue is the chief of ambulance, Tom Reed, the chief of fire, Ron Morden, both fully support this. And to me, that speaks louder than a lot of people yelling at me, to be honest. So that's why I'm putting this proposal forward, and we can debate it as we wish. Thank you.
Before we get a seconder for the motion, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Osmond to provide any commentary on the idea of fire being excluded from the suspension of the policy. Mr. Osmond?
Thank you, Your Worship. The idea of just leaving fire service out at this point is to allow some more time for us to take a look at how fire services are managing. Fire is really concerned about some of the environment right now. We're still not out of the woods. Whether we like it or not, we're still dealing with not just that virus, but other viruses in the community. And fire are really concerned about their staff contingent and whether or not they can maintain that staff. And any risk that they would have to deal with, they prefer to mitigate. So in this case, they're asking to at least maintain status quo for fire, to allow a couple more months to see how things work out. And as Councillor Andy McIntosh has suggested, is to give it until April, and that way we can revisit what we do with fire. There is a lot of concern around the health community about how they're responding, and fire, as Councillor McIntosh has already alluded to, fire finds itself responding to a lot of medical emergencies, both in vehicle incidents as well as in facilities, and they prefer to be very cautious and mitigate any risk of their staff and their volunteers that work with fire services.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond. Councillor McIntosh, one question that I have for you before I move on to getting you a seconder. Ms. Bond brought forward a very excellent point, which was the idea of ensuring that we also have an infectious disease policy as part of our HR policies. Would you be supportive of that being added to your motion as well?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Was there any other questions or a seconder for Councillor McIntosh's motion? Yep. Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor McIntosh. I'm not going to support the suspension of the policy. I would really like to see option 2 being revoked. Is your recommendation specifically using the word suspend or revoking?
Councillor McIntosh, are you open to revoke?
Thank you. Absolutely. I merely copied the town's recommendation for this thing. The one I'm worried about is the firefighters. So whatever we do, I would like to see them exempt until a certain time. Thank you.
Okay, so that motion could, sorry, yep.
Madam Mayor, if I just may, just so that I'm clear in understanding, if you're providing that it's still to apply at this point in time to fire personnel, if you revoke the policy, there's no policy. Right, so
Ms. Landry, excuse me. So at this point, then the recommendation would be to suspend the policy until further time that we get till April, when we get more clarity from the fire perspective, and just leave it as a suspend right now. It won't apply to anybody else within the organization or to boards and council. And then in April, when it comes back to report on fire, at that point, we can suspend it completely. Is that correct?
yes, that is correct. Because if you revoke the policy, there is no policy, and therefore there wouldn't be any obligations as it relates to having the vaccination status for fire personnel, which I think is what council is trying to achieve here.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. Councillor Sherwood, do you have an additional comment on that? Okay, Councillor Stevens?
To you, Your Worship, I won't be able to support the change. I'm gonna go on with Councillor Sherwood, and I want it revoked.
Additional comments? Yeah, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. As for Councillor McIntosh's point regarding the fire department, if we were to revoke this policy, does not the Fire Association have separate mechanisms in place to require? No, just looking for any.
Councillor McIntosh or Mr. Osmond?
No, they do not have one.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Additional commentary? No. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, Mayor. I think before I'd be able to vote for this, Mr. McIntosh's motion, I would like to see the new legal advice before I could reach a decision regarding the firefighters.
Mr. Osmond, could you provide any clarity on the legal side, or Ms. Goen? I know Ms. Goen's here too, or Ms. Landry?
I'll ask Ms. Goen to come up and respond. We've had discussions with our solicitors. She may have some other information that I'm not aware of. I know late today she's been having that discussion. If Ms. Goen can respond.
Ms. Landry will. Thank you.
I just got the signal, if that's okay.
Yep.
So certainly from a legal perspective, it is within council's prerogative and discretion to determine whether they want to suspend and provide an exception to that suspension for any set group, or they can also choose to have the policy remain intact, or they can also revoke the policy. So those options are available to you from a legal perspective. And that was the advice that we actually did obtain from our solicitor.
Councillor McIntosh, do you have additional comment?
Again, I have no problem revoking it. However, as we've been advised tonight, if we don't just suspend it, we will be putting our firefighters in danger and going against the wishes.
Excuse me, reminder from the gallery, please. No, reminder from the gallery to please, there's a public question period is coming. Please have a seat. Thank you.
We'll be going against the wishes of Chief of Ambulance, Tom Reed. Our fire chief, our own fire chief, Ron Morden, supports this recommendation. So if we choose to revoke it, we will be going against their wishes. I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you have a question? No? Okay. Okay, so at this point then, we do need a seconder to Councillor McIntosh's motion that is on the floor currently. Oh, Ms. Landry has a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to just make sure in terms of before council moves forward with making any of its decisions, you do also have the right to put in a policy that would just apply to fire if that was council's desire. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. So in clarification, we can revoke the policy for the organization, leave a similar policy in place or direct staff to create a similar policy that would apply solely to fire that we could report back in April then?
Yes, the only matter that I would raise for council, if you revoke the policy tonight, then the policy is gone and it would be gone until such time as council gets back to you with a new policy, where you're taking into consideration the number of vaccinations, if I can say, or boosters that you are requiring of that particular sector. Does that make sense? So right now you have a policy. If you suspend it, but you still include fire as part of that policy, like you don't suspend it for that particular group, there is still the requirement for them to provide proof of the first and second dose. If you revoke the policy in its entirety and you direct staff to come back to you with a new policy that applies only to fire, we need time to come back to you with that particular policy. And then during that process, we would consider first, second vaccination and whether any boosters are required.
How long would staff need to come back with that policy?
I would suggest that we would lead at least until March to do so. We would want to do some research as it relates to what other sectors and other municipalities are doing and what the recommended approach is as it relates to the number of doses required and any boosters.
Councillor McIntosh, how do you want to proceed with your motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't see any other way around it, but leaving it as is for now. I don't know. you're going to leave 2 months there with the fire department's going to cause a lot of issues and liability issues. Yeah, but again, it's up to council.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm quiet on this issue because I'm surprised by the fire piece. Excuse me. I'm surprised by the fire piece. I didn't realize that it was going to come forward tonight, and always our fellow counselor always does a great job with these things, but I wasn't aware of that. So I feel like as I'm sitting here tonight, I didn't know that there was this fire issue in place, and it's causing me consternation as I sit here. That's not the way that this report reads. It doesn't speak to the fire at all. It feels like it's a last minute thing. To me, under normal circumstances, if we were going to have such a debate about fire, Chief Morton's very accessible to us. He would have been here tonight and would have represented, and we could have asked him some questions. So I want to be respectful to you, Councillor McIntosh, because candidly, I'm usually aligned with what you're speaking to, and I think you usually speak quite intelligently, and you are again tonight. But I feel at a loss to vote on something that I'm not familiar with. Part of me says, should we just push this thing? But the reality of it is, it feels like we're at this point here tonight that we need to make a move going forward. So I guess I don't have a plan in terms of what I'm going to say or do next, but I just wanted to share why I'm quiet and what I'm thinking about. And I find this a bit confusing and last minute, and I don't have access to someone who I would normally ask the question of, and probably would have phoned or called had I known this was part of the discussion tonight. So
there is another alternative that we could do, and I'll run this by perhaps Madam Clerk and Ms. Landry, is that we could defer the topic until the 23rd with the exception. I believe that we really need to work on making sure that we have an answer when it comes to local boards and committees ahead of going out for recruitment. But we could leave the staff policy alone and have more information come back as a report at the next council meeting on the 23rd. That way council has the opportunity to digest the fire information, make a decision appropriately of revoke versus suspend. But we could take care of the local boards and committees immediately today. And I just want to clarify with Ms. Landry or Ms. Khan that would be okay. Ms. Landry's nodding at me.
Yes, you could separate both the two policies and vote on each one separately. You could defer the staff decision as it relates to that policy, and you could proceed with the council with policy, which includes committees.
What is the will of council? Would everybody be comfortable deferring the staff portion of it and that policy till the 23rd, when staff can come back with additional information? Perhaps Chief Morton can attend at that point. And we could talk at that point as well about adding the infectious disease policy as part of it. But we could go ahead and vote on the committees, local boards and council to ensure that we can go ahead with recruitment of volunteers that would not have them requiring vaccination. So I'll look to council to decide how they want to do that. Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you. If we do that, can we revoke it?
Which?
What you suggested.
Revoke the council, local boards and committees? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Through you to either Ms. Landry or Ms. Goen, when I'm looking at the status of vaccination policies in various municipalities, the ones that were given here, over 90% of them had rescinded their policy. And I would think that big places like Guelph, Barrie have fire services as well. Do you know if anything was discussed as far as those large municipalities as to whether they separated out fire?
Ms. Landry?
From the information that we gathered so far, it's our understanding that they have not been separated out, but in some cases they have been, is my understanding. So the purpose of suggesting that we report back in April was to give us an opportunity to reach out to more municipalities to determine whether they did make that separation or not.
Okay. Are we going to move forward
So,
with?
Your Worship, we're going to put forward a motion to rescind the policy for the council, boards, and committees?
Correct.
I'm
Do we need to deal with Councillor McIntosh's first, or can he take it off the floor?
As Madam Mayor, we don't yet have a seconder, so that motion would be lost.
Okay, perfect. So the new motion that I would suggest then is that we move forward a motion to rescind the COVID-19 vaccination policy for members of council, local boards, and committees effective January 10th, 2023, and that the vaccination policy review for staff, we can receive the report and report back on the 23rd meeting with additional information regarding fire, and that stays as is for now. Ms. Landry's nodding at me like she is.
Yes, so it's essentially because I think you're seeking staff to bring back additional information over and above what's contained in the report at this particular time. So then that would be a referral back to staff to bring back that information to you.
Perfect. I'm happy to move that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Stevens? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
If I could, through you, Mr. Osmond, if we could ensure that either Mr. Richardson or Mr. Morton is here, like I think they should be here if we're going to be talking about their department, and should be here live so we can have that conversation if that's possible.
Mr. Osmond?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor Taylor, unfortunately the chief was not available, and there's things going on right now with fire service, and he couldn't be available this evening, and this was very short notice, so we didn't have the opportunity to do that. So I think the course of action you're taking now is the one to take to clarify. We'll be back again on the 23rd, and absolutely the chief, unless there's something comes up, will be on site.
Wonderful. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, Mayor Post. To that effect, also, I was wondering if we could request that town council be present at that meeting also. Or pardon me, the councillor of town. Yeah, sorry, the lawyer, legal counsel. That's what I meant. I apologize.
Mr. Osmond or Ms. Landry, is that possible?
Certainly, we'll reach out to our solicitor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stevens?
And if they're not available, sorry, through your worship, if they're not available, can we get a special meeting arranged?
Ms. Landry?
If I may, Mayor Post, if we could perhaps leave it flexible that it be January 23rd or an alternate date, just based on the availability of both staff and town council, that would be much appreciated. But
Absolutely.
understanding that time is of the essence.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Was there any additional questions from members of council? No, otherwise I will call the vote. All in favor? And any opposed? None? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 12.9 is Greenwood Cemetery Bylaw Update. The recommendation is that report INS 2023-001 Greenwood Cemetery Bylaw Update be received, and that council amend bylaw 2018-50 to replace Schedule A Greenwood Cemetery price list with an updated Schedule A, and that staff review and amend Schedule A price list on an annual basis by applying the unadjusted consumer price index CPI to the unit rates and fees. Can I have a motion, please? Deputy Mayor, and seconded by Councillor Andrews. Was there any additional questions or comments on this report? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Items of correspondence. The recommendation is that the following correspondence be received. Item 13.1 is from Minister Steve Clark, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, regarding Greenbelt amendments and revocation of the Central Pickering Development Plan. Item 13.2 is Credit Valley Conservation regarding Bill 23, the County of Dufferin Official Plan Amendment, Municipal Comprehensive Review, 13.4 from the Township of Amaranth, Notice of Public Meeting for Consent Application, 13.5 Town of Caledon Government Relations in 2023 Roma Conference, 13.6 Town of Mono More Homes Built Faster Act 2022, correspondence from Mr. Lovisato, correspondence from Mr. Trato, and 13.9 is also from Minister Clark regarding recruiting new intern building inspectors. 13.10 from Graciela Cardenas Mustafa, request to revoke the vaccination policy. And 13.11 from Brenda and Lino Chioma, vaccination policy review. Can I have a motion to receive all items of correspondence? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Was there any questions? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is pertaining to the inspectors, and I presume this might go through to Ms. Landry, or would it be another general manager responsible for the building department? That would be Mr. Koselek, then my apologies. Okay. For the sake of fulfilling some of the requirements and the fast tracking of building inspectors, what challenges have you experienced or the department has experienced, and do you foresee any challenges moving ahead, especially with the rapid growth that has certainly been posted
Mr. Koslek?
in this municipality?
Certainly. Through the chair to Councillor Andrews, we just had one of our staff after about 20 years with the town retire. So we're presently in the recruitment process. We'll have a better idea in a week or two how we do with the applicants on it. I think that'll be a big test if we do get qualified people applying for the position. Right now we have a full-time chief building official and one inspector, and we'll have a second inspector. So we're expecting a lot of demand come summertime with a lot of the permits coming up, a lot of the developments. We follow them through planning. We're expecting a big busy summer at the building department, but once we have the third staff member, we should be in good shape for it.
Great. Thank you for that update.
Any additional questions on any of the other items of correspondence? Seeing none. Did I already get a motion? No, I didn't. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Okay. Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Committee and board minutes, item 14. The recommendation is that the minutes of the following meetings be received. The Orangeville Public Library Board minutes from September 28th, the Committee of Adjustment minutes from November 2nd, and the Orangeville BIA minutes from November 17th. Can I have a motion to receive those? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Prendergast, was there any questions or comments on any of the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Any notices of motion prior to meeting? There was none. Notices of motion at meeting. Are there any notice of motion from any members of council? Seeing none. Any new business? Councillor Andrews and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to inform the general public that this is National Alzheimer's Month, as was proclaimed by the mayor and others that were in attendance. It's an important recognition for those of you and those of us who happen to have family members who are suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia. I think that the organizations that are involved are very much supportive of that. And to support our local Alzheimer's Society in Dufferin County, they have a Skates and Scones event, which is coming up this Sunday, January 15th at the Alder Complex between 1:30 and 3:30. I'm hoping that those that are watching and those in attendance might be able to put their skates and support this great organization.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Post. So what I wanted to talk about, unfortunately, is a little bit lighter than what you're talking about. Thank you for yours, Councillor Andrews. Mine is about frivolity and silliness, and that is on the 28th of January, you can participate in the Pond Spiel. And the Orangeville Curling Club is putting on the Pond Spiel. Yours truly has won it. So the curling is low, very low skilled, but super fun. 8 o'clock in the morning. Call the curling club if you want to play. And it's their big fundraiser for the year and great for the community. So please support this if you can.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Was there any additional items of new business? Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you. I just want to thank staff and council for the gift basket they presented to me on the passing of my brother. I thank you.
Very welcome. Any additional items of new business? Seeing none, we will move on to public question period. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. I will check with Mona first. Is there anybody on the line? Okay, perfect. We will proceed with anybody in chambers who wishes to ask a question. A reminder that you are limited to 2 minutes, but please go ahead and head up to the delegation if you do have something. You must use your microphone and please come up to the delegation. And just a reminder that decorum is expected during this participation. And oh, also, sorry, can you just turn on the mic and we do need your name and address for the record, please.
Name is Andrea Parr. I live in Melanchthon. I would like an answer from Chief McIntosh as to why the Grand Valley firefighters who do not have a mandate, who are not vaxxed, can work alongside mutual aid with Orangeville firefighters.
Councillor McIntosh, do you wish to reply?
Yes, thank you. I have no idea. You'd have to ask them. Thank you.
If you want to speak, please come up to the mic. Thank you. Again, your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Jeremy Glass. I'm at 648 Main Street East, Shelburne. My question is, if you could pass it forward to the chief, is when the municipality of Toronto and 90% of the municipalities, as you say, are not requiring this vaccination mandate anymore, and they've dropped this mandate, what science does our chief have that's different from their science? Where is he getting his information where he feels that the firefighters in particular should be discriminated against? You know, this, to me, like the worst part of this is the discrimination. We've never dealt with discrimination like this in Canada before and in the world before. You know, and unless we could admit and people start admitting what we've done here is wrong, we followed bad science and we're in a bad place. I'm not blaming any of you. We followed some bad science. You know, these Pfizer reports didn't come out till just recently saying, you know, they never did test this for transmission. You know, this never did go through trials with animal trials. This, you know, this never did get passed by our FDA, and yet we made these coercing decisions on this. You know, people were coerced into taking this vaccination to see loved ones at a senior center. People were coerced into taking this vaccination so they could keep their job. People were coerced into this so people could see family and travel. You know, this isn't right. You know, discrimination we faced with is disgusting. And medical coercion, whether you believe in these vaccinations now or not, is a very slippery slope for every single one of us. You know, line 1 of our Nuremberg Code is informed consent. You must have absolute informed consent of a patient for a medical procedure without any type of medical coercion. And medical coercion is everything from a free ice cream cone to taking somebody's job away or telling them they can't see a loved one. You know, we all have a choice. This is our body and we have a choice. You know, I'm not even going to tell you if I'm vaccinated because that's none of your business, anybody's business. It's definitely none of my employer's business. That's between me and my doctor, and that's where it should have been kept. And that's just my 2 cents on it. If you could ask the chief, where is he getting his information that's so different from where Toronto got their information? You know, and I'll leave it at that. That's not an answer any of you could give me, but maybe that's something that the fire chief could come back here from the 23rd, share with us where he's getting his information from.
Thank you for your
All right,
comment,
thank you.
Speaker. Is there anybody else wishing to make comment? Respond?
May I ask another question?
Yep.
Peggy Bond, 18 Goldgate. So under the staff policy, I saw that the third recommendation for the suspension was because your contractors were having trouble getting tradespeople. Is that covered under the staff policy, or is that under the one that was revoked?
Ms. Landry?
That's under the staff policy.
So you'll still have trouble getting trades and vendors and completing infrastructure until that's.
So the policy still exists at this given point in time until we come back to council. Yeah.
So in 2 weeks, it'll come back to council and then we can take care of it at that point. Thanks. Thanks, Ms. Bond. Was there any additional questions? Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Edward Carolan, 270-353 Highway 9 Mono. I don't know how many questions because I have a litany.
You have 2 minutes, so fit them in there.
I just have one, and it's after 2 that you've taken 18 months ago, are they still working? That's it. That's the only question. Is those 2 shots that you took 18 months ago still working? And now we have a government saying you're going to have boosters because they're not. I just given you a little hint there. Those 2 shots don't work. They didn't work back then. They don't work now. So to come with this pretense that you're saving people, I mean, think about just please think about that. They don't work 18 months ago. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Was there any additional questions? Sir, your name and address for the record.
Yeah, good evening, Council. John Bell, I reside here in Orangeville. Just looking for some clarity. One question I have, I haven't been able to get it through email to a few of you, but did the council receive any sort of funding from any sort of provincial or federal government or any other source in terms of keeping mandates or any funding to do with COVID-19 in particular?
I will maybe turn it over to either Mr. Osmond or Ms. Landry.
If I understand your question for the COVID mandate, no, we received no funding from federal or provincial sources.
Any other source, sir?
No.
Thank you. One last thing here, I guess, for Ms. Post, for you in particular. We often tout diversity and inclusion, which is fantastic and fully on board. I just wonder, with your newfound position of power, have you put any thought into how you will carry forward that diversity, inclusion, and equal rights to people who want some sort of medical freedom and their decision to be included in society just after making their own medical decisions?
Absolutely. And, I will continue. I'm not a doctor, so I will continue to follow the recommendations that are set upon me by public health. I'm in a position where I'm not a doctor and I'm not a medical professional, so I rely on the expertise of medical professionals to direct me and guide me. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Was there any additional questions from any member of the gallery? Again, your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, Dipna Carolyn, 48 Blue Heron. My question is, we spoke about the 2 vaccines that you've come here to talk about the vaccination policy, whether to extend it, amend it, revoke it. Did you come with any evidence to how the policy worked in the first place, like with illness, or was it? Did you come with opinion or did you come with facts? And is that how? Like, I read the report, but I didn't see anything in there as far as stats. So I was just wondering, that's my question.
I would maybe turn it to Ms. Landry, but I don't believe we have direct statistics on how the policy worked. But I can tell you that the policy was implemented under the advice of public health guidance and our legal opinions, as well as HR opinions.
So without I do accounting work, so if I go to my employer and say you did really well, they're going to have me verify that, like, with information. So that's why I'm just wondering, in this whole process, you must have sat down maybe and said, because we know some fallouts, not even just medically, but people losing their job, division in society, small businesses closing up. So that I think that it deserves contemplation and reflection. Actually, the fallout deserves that.
I appreciate your comment. Thank you. Was there any additional questions or comments from the gallery? And I will check one more time with Mona. Was there anybody on the line? Okay. Thank you very much. We will go ahead and move on to bylaws then. There's a recommendation that the bylaws listed below be read 3 times and finally passed. A bylaw to provide for the levy and collection rates or levies for the town of Orangeville for the interim levy of the year 2023. A bylaw to authorize the temporary borrowing of monies as specified in this bylaw to meet, until taxes are collected, the current expenditures of the corporation of the town of Orangeville for the year 2023. A bylaw to amend bylaw 2018-50, being a bylaw with respect to the maintenance, management, regulation, and control of Orangeville Greenwood Cemetery, and a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its regular meeting held today, January 9th, 2023. Can I have a motion? Councillor Sherwood and Councillor Stevens, was there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously, and we just need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Andrews and Deputy Mayor, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Have a good night, everybody.